Domeli and also an entrepreneur, which is Utibelo Utwane, who gets to help us grow into this conversation. And she is the founder of the Collective Intelligence, a legal consultancy company in South Africa. Sister Tibelo, welcome to Daily Thetha.
Thank you for having me.
Now, in Kuluma, I mean, we saw before the ad break the stories speaking about how the challenges that besifazane are going through. Do you think possibly the law in South Africa needs to be amended because it's more of the Western than of our own cultures as South Africans?
No, 100%. There will always be an element of clashing when it comes to, customary law and when it comes to westernized law, especially when it comes to issues of marriage. But the Constitution aims to protect vulnerable groups in society. And in the case of marriages, the most vulnerable groups, as you have seen with Lerato and Kaise, is always women. Their story is not unique.
Yeah.
It's amplified because they are public figures. But this happens every single day across the board, across the country, across cultures, And every single day, women find themselves misplaced, specifically because of one question, which comes to being when a man especially dies. If he dies before the woman. And the question is always, was there even a marriage in the first place? And that's how women get displaced.
Maybe because what constitutes as a marriage, whether it is one that you signed in court and the other one which is a customary marriage. Can you give us the differences in that? And when are you married according to customary law?
Okay, according to customary law, according to the Recognition of Customary Marriages Act, there are 3 requirements that have to be met before parties can be said to be married in under customary law.
Yeah.
And that would be, they must be over 18, they must consent to being married under customary law, and the marriage or the union must be celebrated and negotiated in accordance with customary law. That's the 3rd requirement. It doesn't say there must be handing over of a bride, there must be this, there must be exchange of gifts, there must just be a celebration. And that celebration can be something as small as a lunch, as long as both families are there and both the husband and the wife are there, and there is a union or an acknowledgement kind of celebration in honor of their union, then that 3rd requirement has been met.
So just because of this mahadi, it doesn't constitute as a marriage
wasn't met, no.
Because there isn't an actual celebration. So, and at that point, I cannot right. It doesn't matter for how long.
At that point, you're engaged in Sahor. I think, like I said, we have tried to merge Western with practices with traditional practices. And what people don't understand is that a white wedding is a traditional celebration marriage. Right? And then we have our customary marriages, which is a celebration for Batho Babatho. So the difficulty always comes in families then saying things like, no, but azanga baya kerekeng, azanga baya court basaina, you know, and then they displace women like that when the husband dies. That we only did traditional marriage. We haven't done white wedding. We haven't signed. But we haven't signed.
One of the other biggest issues, generally, when people want to disqualify you from lona lenyalo, kapa from the asset, is they use the cultural part of you not being married. Can culture strip me away from my rights according to the Constitution?
Definitely not according to the Constitution. And like I said at the beginning, the Constitution aims to protect vulnerable groups, and vulnerable in this scenario would be a woman. So once those 3 requirements have been met that I discussed earlier, then there is a customary marriage. And even if Halia Saina and your partner dies, the weekend after you do the Lobola celebration, after you celebrate Talinyalo, you are still married. And you cannot be displaced from your home by your husband's mother or your husband's family.
Yes, Tibelo, you look at how Bonino was Lerato, where something whereby her challenge act was public, where she was questioned, she was taken back and forth and scrutinized, and as I told you to what azile. Now, do you then probably suggest to which the agreement where does a will probably kick in here in a sense of which as in Ashatanga part I'm giving it to you? Does that something that plays a part in this conversation?
Yeah, first and foremost, if there's no will in place, then the person who dies, the husband in this case, is said to have died intestate. And the person who inherits, if there are no children, is the wife, by virtue of being a surviving spouse. So if there's no will in place, the first person to inherit will be the wife. But if they passed away in the same car accident, for example, or whatever horrific accident, and there's no wife, there's no husband, then the person who's going to inherit, if there are no children, are the parents of each party. But the parents will also inherit 50-50 because the husband and wife would have been married in community of property, right? So my challenge with this is that there's a lack of education around the law. And we cannot, or rather women, cannot act on something that they do not know. And like I said, Lerato and Kaise, unfortunately, but fortunately, are public figures. And they were able to make noise around that topic. A topic which many people do not know in the rurals. You know, many women are displaced all the time, like I said.
Yes, Nicolette, ngicabangisa isimo sokuthi besinengane kodwa I had a child before singena emshadweni and kushone mina, so legally when you stole my wife, but in that case that child, what happens to the assets? Does that child continue to lie, or they just write the child off if bengana win?
So if there was no will in place, automatically the person who's going to inherit the husband's 50% of the estate. I think they were married in community of property. The person who will inherit the husband's 50% of the estate is the surviving spouse and his extramarital child. Even if he had that child when he was already married to the wife, that child will inherit. If there was a will in place and the will says only my child inherits, then only then will the wife not inherit. She can't contest that will, it is valid. Only my child can inherit. The man can also say only my wife will inherit, and that child who's extramarital won't be able to inherit. Otherwise, then what's the point of the will if we're going to, still make parties who he didn't intend to inherit as per that will?
Essentially going against his wishes.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about the realities now, because it's great that the law is there, developed. But the reality is that in our families, especially black families, people have a very big disregard for the law. So and I just want to understand, if I'm a widow right now and I'm sitting and I'm listening to this conversation and I'm in a similar situation, do I bring in a lawyer? Because when I bring in a lawyer, so what tools can I use?
Well, unfortunately, otherwise you'll be bullied, and that is the nature of the reality. The only way to do that is to go and consult with an attorney, because there are ways around it. First and foremost, there's absolutely no reason why a woman has to lose her home, whether or not there are children involved. Worse when children are involved, there's absolutely no reason why a surviving biological parent is stripped of her children, because these are our children, these are my son's children, they're coming to live with us. So the first and foremost thing to do is go consult an attorney, even if there was no will in place. As the wife, by the law of interstate succession, you stand to inherit his assets, his property, even if you are married out of community of property. If he doesn't have a will in place, the will is the defining document which will set out what you inherit. But if there was no will, everything is yours, in or out of community of property.
But I think, Melody, before we go social media, one of the interesting things is that there is then a way for the partner to plan even before the death.
Kodwa emakhaya ulwazi olungekho. In our homeland alukho. That makes this a big problem. Now umlayezo ungenayo from Wola Jama Mbongeni uthi, yes, men also do go through a tough time when they lose their wives. In reference to mourning, most of our youth today is no longer showing high morals and respect for our culture. Losing a wife can be extremely life-changing, especially when there are children to raise. Hey, umlayezo ongenayo-ke nabo phuma kunina anibukele, siyajabula ukuthi nisakwazi ukuthi lo nixhumana nathi. Ake sithathe ikhefu besibuya siqhubeke nenkulumo yethu la ku-Daily Thetha.